Congress is not killing the Department of Education. They're trying to cut it into pieces and hide it all over Washington. I'm Emily Fort with the Homeschool Freedom Coalition, and there are 10 bad bills moving in Washington, D.C. right now that homeschoolers need to know about, and we need you to get involved and help us stop them. The bills are H.R. 9602 through H.R. 9611, and they were filed by GOP representatives. The bills have been packaged together under the very nice-sounding name, Less Bureaucracy, Better Education. But what they actually do is break up the Department of Education into pieces and distribute its programs and responsibilities across multiple other federal agencies, including the Department of Labor, Health and Human Services, the Treasury, Interior, and the State Department. So, in other words, I think it's maybe like Congress is trying to cut the Department of Education up like a pie. One slice goes to the Labor, one slice goes to Health and Human Services, one slice goes to the Treasury, one slice goes to the Department of the Interior, and, finally, the last slice goes to the State Department. So, yes, they'll get to say the Department of Education doesn't exist anymore, but all the federal programs and the federal staff and the funding and the rules and the federal influence will all still be in Washington, D.C., just in new departments. And that kind of brings us to the one thing homeschoolers actually liked about the Department of Education, if we had to pick something to like about that horrible entity, is that we knew where it was. When Washington pushed bad education policy, everybody in the country knew who was responsible. We knew which congressional committees to watch. We knew where the federal programs and the regulations and the strings, we knew where they were all coming from. So while the Department of Education is powerful and not a good entity, at least it was visible. You could tell where things were coming from. And so that when the government school system becomes a complete dumpster fire, everyone knew where that was coming from. The buck stops with the Department of Education. So it's obvious that these 10 bills make all federal education influence harder to track and, more importantly, harder to stop. Instead of one visible bureaucracy, this education policy would be buried all over D.C. And it would be a huge advantage. You have to think about this from a political perspective. Who is benefiting from this bill? Okay. When you close the doors on the Department of Education, you're going to automatically activate the entire big ed lobby, which involves, millions of Americans work for, or their company is dependent on, or they're, like they work in the schools. They're a therapist for the school. They're a nurse for the school. They're a bus driver. Their husband, runs HVAC systems for the school. Like the trickle down. Oh, we're a catering company that makes the lunch. Like there are millions of people to be mobilized on behalf of big ed. So when you take out the Department of Education, even on paper in this ridiculous way, you're activating a whole bunch of people that'll be made angry. Or the left will try very hard to mobilize those people, and they have effective lobby groups. And, that's part of what teachers are paying for with their teachers union dues, is this huge entity that works to advance their goals in D.C., usually via the Department of Education. So if you're going to do all this and irritate all these voters, right, what's the advantage if you're not going to deliver for the conservatives? And honestly, this is what obviously Trump himself wanted, because this is what he stated in his executive order, was to push this stuff back down to the states. Well, who does benefit, I believe, is these large for-profit companies, the testing companies, and most importantly, the technology vendors, the government contractors behind the for-profit school choice world. These people have national groups, national full-time lobbyists. They have PAC money. They have government affairs teams. They stand to make billions of dollars on the deregulated, quote unquote, school choice, where, the software that has to allocate all the school choice money, the guys selling that software are going to make billions of dollars over the next 10 years. Billions with a B, okay? They know this. And so they can afford to track bills in 5 different committees in 5 different departments of state. They can afford to be influencing the re-election campaign of different committee members in all these different committees. From their perspective, they can follow every slice of the pie into whichever agency these nasty bills would send it. They can pressure all the committee members across 8 departments doesn't bother them. Ordinary homeschool parents or parents who care about educational freedom or parents that care about just like parental rights in general, they can't do any of that. So Big Ed and the for-profit school choice world, they have the money to follow every federal program and see wherever the money goes and track and lobby those people effectively. And it essentially, especially at election time, instead of having to lobby the Department of Education to get, the things they want passed, they just have to go into the chairman of some committee in the Labor Department into his reelection race. That's it. We've made their job of lobbying far, far easier if these bills pass. Really bad news. I mean, across the board, this doesn't help homeschoolers at all. It doesn't end the Department of Education. It doesn't do what Trump wanted, which was to send these responsibilities back down to the state level. So parents are left trying to find out, who's in charge, who's on base, who do we have to talk to make this, bad educational policy stop. And I hope it's obvious how bad these nasty bills are. If you don't have any more time to watch any more of the video, click the link below right now to send an email directly to your congressman telling them to vote no on these bills that would just carve up the Department of Education and move them around DC, okay? Now, as a quick reminder, President Trump campaigned on shutting down the Department of Education, and we love that, okay? We're all about it. We all celebrated in March of 25 when he signed his executive order saying that he wanted the Linda McMahon to facilitate the department's closure, which, sounds awesome to me. And his order said, and I want to read this here so you can hear exactly what Trump said and understand why these bills are not what either he wanted or what conservatives or parents or homeschoolers or private school parents wanted. And he said here, and I'll read this quick. Our nation's bright future relies on empowered families, engaged communities, and excellent educational opportunities for every child. Unfortunately, the experiment of controlling America's education through federal programs and dollars and the unaccountable bureaucracy these programs and dollars support has plainly failed our children, our teachers, and our family. I mean, we could not agree more. The problem was never the name on the outside of the building. The problem was, like he said, the federal programs and dollars, the federal staff, the federal rules, the federal bureaucracy. The executive order also, I know it went on to say that the main function should be returned to the states. And that was a quote, returned to the states. This is the promise that homeschoolers heard. We're essentially going to shut down the department in DC, and the states are going to handle this stuff. We're going to end federal control. Your state's going to decide. Now, obviously, President Trump cannot just legally abolish the department by an executive order because Congress created these programs through federal law. So Congress has to repeal or change those laws. And this is why is the Republican-controlled Congress filing bills like this? That this 10-pack that do the exact opposite of what President Trump said he wanted. Not even 10 days ago, on July 15, the House Education and Workforce Committee, chaired by a Republican, Tim Walberg of Michigan, passed a whole slew of bills. It's 9602 through 9611, a whole bunch of them, that instead of ending education authority for the bureaucrat lunatics in DC, this package just redistributed it. And so instead of returning the control to the states, which Trump said he wanted, and ending federal control, which Trump blamed for the problems in education, we're just going to redistribute it out into different federal agencies. That this was not necessary. It wasn't the only way. There are other bills before Congress that accomplish Trump's goal and our goal and the homeschoolers' goal and everyone who cares about the future of American education. There are other bills. I know, Congressman Barry Moore of Alabama, his bill 2691, that would abolish the Department of Education and provide the education funding for those, legally required functions that they're required by law, since Congress won't just undo the laws they passed, giving that responsibility to the DOE. But Chairman Walberg's committee decided to give their time and attention to 9602 through 9611 instead. And Congressman Moore's bill has languished in the committee, receiving no consideration. So homeschoolers should be asking, why is Congress advancing bills that divide federal education authority instead of abolishing it? And why are we, if we're the conservative party and we're all about decentralization of power, we want everything at the local level, these bills are the opposite of that, okay? We want the Department of Education dead, not divided. We do not want its power hidden, inside the Labor Department or we don't want to be chasing down bad educational policy in the Health and Human Services Department. We don't want the same federal influence preserved under 5 different State Department letterheads. And we do not want Congress taking down, oh, yay, we took down the sign on the front of the Department of Education door. Oh, it's closed. Let's have a photo op. That's not it. If all the same staff, these bills literally say the same staff and funding all just move to a new department. This is why I've been saying this for a long time. The leave us alone era of homeschooling is over. We have to get loud. We have to get more organized. We have to get very politically engaged. This is the time for that. And these bills in particular, what's happening is the Republicans who are trying to appease everybody, right? Because that's what you do when you're in office. You're trying to keep your seat, so you're trying to irritate as few voters as possible. And so they're going, well, we get to say we abolished the Department of Education, which, conservatives will like that. And yeah, it won't look good to the other team, but, they'll see that we didn't actually fire anyone or cut any spending or take any responsibilities away. So that won't make them too mad. They're not hearing from people like you and me who care very much about the future of education in America, about the future of ending the government and federal control over education. They need to hear from us louder than ever. This is, they think there's 2 teams, team big government or team other big government. And there's a whole other team here saying parents and state and local control is far superior to anything the federal government has ever delivered. It's unarguable that ever since the Department of Education came into being, America's academic standards have done nothing but collapse. Nothing. So right now, take a minute. Let's get loud. Let's mobilize. Let's do the thing, right? Click below. Send a pre-written email to your congressman telling them to vote no on H.R. 9602 through H.R. 9611, the bills that would cut up the Department of Education and redistribute its functions around the federal government. Our pre-written email, which you can edit it so you can make it say whatever you want, but it basically says very clearly, we do not want the Department of Education divided. We want it abolished. Okay, that's what we need to tell them. We need to get loud. So thank you for listening. It's a long video. I appreciate your attention. In the meantime, stay free, stay the course.